You already sense it. She doesn't respect you. You feel it when she talks over you, ignores what you say, or treats your presence like an option rather than a priority. But here's what most men don't see. It didn't start yesterday. Respect doesn't vanish overnight. It slips away quietly, subtly, the moment a man begins abandoning his own needs, his own identity, all in an effort to keep a relationship intact. And the part most men get wrong? They think the answer is to give more, try harder, be nicer. That impulse, as natural as it feels, is exactly what accelerates the decline. Keep following it, and you won't just lose her respect. You'll lose your position, your identity, and ultimately, your own self-respect. This isn't a pep talk. It's not about making you feel better. This is about showing you what actually restores respect before it's too late. You've probably heard the phrase, happy wife, happy life. So often it feels like common sense. That's exactly why it's dangerous. Not because caring about your partner is wrong, but because it's been twisted into a silent rule telling men to erase themselves for the sake of peace. That's exactly where respect starts dying, quietly, almost imperceptibly. When a man believes his role is simply to agree, to accommodate, to bend whenever she pushes, he tells himself he's being loving. But what he's really doing is teaching her nervous system that he has no center, no limits, and women don't respect men who lack boundaries. From the inside, it feels noble. You tell yourself you're being understanding, that you're avoiding conflict, that you're protecting the relationship. You say yes when you mean no. You cancel your plans. You swallow frustration. You convince yourself it's temporary. But on her side, something else is happening. She's learning that your boundaries are negotiable, or worse, non-existent. Picture this man. He responds with, "Sure, whatever you want." At first it feels good, easy, effortless. She feels cared for. But over time, that man loses his edge. He stops feeling like someone who chooses, someone who leads. He becomes predictable. He becomes safe in the least compelling way. He no longer feels like a man with presence. He becomes a man who complies. And compliance is not attraction. Compliance is surrender. Here's what most men misunderstand. She doesn't lose respect because you occasionally set a limit. She loses respect because you never do. A man with no resistance, no line he won't cross, stops feeling grounded, solid, reliable. And women don't relax around men who aren't solid. They push, they test, sometimes without even realizing why. Respect isn't built on agreement, it's built on clarity, the sense that the man in front of her knows who he is and refuses to abandon himself just to avoid tension. Remove friction entirely, and you don't create harmony. You create imbalance, and imbalance always breeds contempt. So if you're honest, the real question isn't whether being agreeable has cost you respect. It's why you became afraid of disagreement in the first place. Why does saying no feel like a risk instead of a boundary? Why does standing your ground feel scarier than slowly fading into the background? Until you answer that, you'll keep thinking the solution is to give more when what's actually missing is you. A woman doesn't judge your self-worth by the words you speak. She perceives it through your choices, through what you allow, through how quickly you abandon your values when pressure arises. Long before she consciously identifies it, her nervous system is taking notes. Self-respect isn't loud or performative. It's quiet, steady, evident in the way you navigate life. When a man respects himself, he doesn't have to announce it. It's visible in the decisions he makes, in what he protects, in what he refuses to compromise just to maintain someone's approval. When self-respect is absent, a predictable pattern emerges. You give too much, too fast, for too little in return. You over-explain. You over-accommodate. You convince yourself that if you just try harder, do more, be better, she'll finally recognize your worth. What actually happens is far more corrosive. Low self-esteem leads to overgiving. Overgiving breeds unspoken resentment, and resentment, when swallowed, seeps out subtly, in passive comments, emotional withdrawal, or unspoken expectations. She may not consciously recognize it, but she can feel it, and that imbalance destroys attraction. One of the most dangerous thoughts a man can adopt in a relationship is this: I'm lucky to have her. Appreciation isn't wrong, But when luck replaces choice, you shrink. You stop being a man she actively chose and start feeling like someone who was granted access. That shift alone changes your energy, your presence, your confidence. Attraction wanes when masculine presence fades. When your sense of self depends on her approval, your energy becomes hesitant. You second guess yourself. You constantly gauge her reactions to determine who you're allowed to be. And a woman cannot admire a man who needs her permission to exist. Here's a truth many men avoid because it's uncomfortable. Women don't leave men because those men are bad. They leave because the man standing in front of them has stopped standing for himself. When you respect yourself, you make choices that demand respect. You hold your line without apology. You exist fully, regardless of whether she approves. And that presence, that self-assured energy, is magnetic in a way words cannot imitate. If a woman doesn't respect you, the fix isn't more effort. It's not bending, pleasing, or sacrificing your core. The fix is remembering who you are, reclaiming your boundaries, and showing up as a man with clarity, purpose, and self-respect. That's what restores attraction. That's what restores respect. And it starts with one thing: refusing to abandon yourself for the sake of temporary comfort. They leave when a man stops being admirable. When the person standing in front of her no longer feels grounded, purposeful, or internally anchored, something inside her switches off, not out of malice, but instinct. She senses your self-doubt long before you ever voice it. She feels when your confidence is borrowed rather than earned. And once that happens, no amount of effort, affection, or reassurance can fill the gap left by the absence of genuine self-respect. The root of the problem often lies deeper. Low self-worth rarely appears from nowhere. It's usually rooted in one fundamental fear: the fear that if you don't cling tightly, she will disappear. That fear is subtle, but it quietly eats away at a relationship from the inside. It doesn't arrive as panic or desperation. At first, it shows up as restraint, silence, hesitation, the constant inner question: is this worth risking her? The moment that question begins guiding your choices, the balance of power has already shifted. When the fear of losing her outweighs the fear of losing yourself, attraction begins to slip. Not dramatically, not suddenly, but gradually, imperceptibly, until it becomes undeniable. Fear makes you reactive, not solid. Women instinctively sense this. They don't feel drawn to men who are led by worry, who negotiate every interaction out of anxiety. Here's how it typically plays out. She crosses a small line, not a massive betrayal, just a subtle dismissal or lack of consideration. Your body feels it immediately, but instead of addressing it, your mind calculates: if I speak up, will it create tension? Will she pull away? Will I lose her? So, you stay quiet. You tell yourself it's minor, that harmony is more important than honesty. And she notices. Not consciously, but on a deep psychological level, she feels the shift. The man in front of her is no longer choosing peace from strength, he's choosing silence from fear, and fear is never magnetic. A man who is afraid to walk away communicates a powerful unspoken message: I will tolerate more than I should. Once that message lands, the dynamic changes. She may not respect it, she may not even like it, but she will test it. Testing is instinctive. Unresolved fear invites testing. And here's a truth most men struggle to accept. The moment you prove you won't leave, she learns she can push the boundaries, intentionally or not. Not because she's cruel, but because human dynamics respond to leverage. The person with less willingness to walk away always holds less power. Love is not measured by endurance or tolerance. It's measured by choice. Staying in situations that erode your dignity isn't love. It's avoidance. Avoidance of loss, avoidance of loneliness, avoidance of facing yourself without someone else as a crutch. Real strength in a relationship doesn't come from trying to control your partner. It comes from self-trust, from knowing you can survive discomfort, separation, even the possibility of her leaving, and still remain whole. Love doesn't require tolerating disrespect. It doesn't demand shrinking so another person can feel secure. Healthy love exists between two people who know they can walk away but actively choose not to. So if control isn't the answer, what is? How do you reclaim respect without slipping into aggression, bitterness, or reactivity? The answer starts with boundaries, and most men misunderstand this immediately. They picture ultimatums, threats, power plays. True boundaries aren't about controlling her, they're about controlling yourself. They're lines drawn to stay aligned with who you are, not tools to manage her behavior. And that difference changes everything. A man without boundaries reacts. He waits for her mood to dictate his tone. He waits for approval before acting. Emotional spikes control him. And over time, he loses his position, not because she wants to dominate him, but because there's no solid presence for her to rely on. Boundaries create emotional safety, not restriction. A woman senses security with a man whose values are consistent, whose presence is stable. She doesn't have to guess where he stands or push to find his limits. His clarity does that work for her. Many men sabotage themselves by confusing emotional expression with emotional control. They think being honest requires outbursts or that being masculine demands total suppression. Both extremes fail. A man who loses emotional control doesn't look passionate. He looks unstable, and instability erodes respect faster than silence ever could. Self-leadership is the ability to pause instead of react, to feel anger without letting it consume you, to address issues directly, calmly, and without needing to dominate the moment. That presence communicates power silently. I am grounded. I can endure discomfort. I don't need to raise my voice to be taken seriously. Women don't respect volume, they respect certainty. A man who enforces boundaries doesn't beg, he doesn't threaten. He simply defines his position clearly and follows through with his actions. That consistency signals something vital. I am whole, regardless of how you act. I am anchored in myself, and that is magnetic in ways words cannot replicate. When you couple self-respect with clear boundaries, something remarkable happens. Attraction deepens. She feels safe yet challenged. She experiences the presence of a man who is consistent, predictable in his values, and unshakable in his core. He is neither distant nor aggressive. He simply exists with integrity. That's the foundation of admiration. That's how respect is restored, not through pleading or compliance, but through quiet, unwavering self-possession. The path forward is simple but rarely easy. Reclaim yourself. Reestablish your lines. Stop sacrificing your identity to prevent discomfort. Stop giving endlessly without reciprocity. When you choose yourself first, you stop operating from fear. And when fear is gone, respect returns, attraction strengthens, and the relationship can finally exist on the foundation it always should have: choice, presence, and self-respect. This is where transformation begins, not through manipulation or effort to control her behavior, but through consistent self-alignment. Every decision, every action, every boundary you enforce communicates a single truth. You are a man who stands for himself. And that truth, more than anything else, restores the admiration and respect that once felt lost. If something crosses his line, he addresses it. If it continues, he steps back, not in anger, not in drama, but in alignment with who he is. That consistency is what shifts the dynamic. When your actions reflect your values, respect follows naturally, not because it is demanded, but because it is earned through self-trust. You don't need to argue your worth. You don't need to convince anyone to treat you well. Your boundaries do the work quietly, steadily, without fanfare. But boundaries alone aren't enough, because if your sense of direction depends entirely on the relationship, those boundaries will eventually crumble. They need a foundation deeper than someone else's reactions. That foundation is your center, a life that moves forward with purpose, independent of her presence or approval. And this is where many men falter, often too late. They let the relationship dictate the rhythm of their lives instead of leading it with intention. Women, whether they admit it or not, pay attention to one thing above all: the trajectory of your life. Not your promises, not potential, but the path you're actively pursuing. How you allocate your time, what you prioritize under pressure, whether your life is moving forward on its own momentum, these are the signals she reads constantly. Men who make the relationship the axis of their existence, who allow her needs and moods to dictate their focus, gradually lose respect without ever realizing it. What begins as devotion slowly becomes weight. A man adrift emotionally feels heavy, not because he demands, but because he drifts. And when a woman senses that, she subconsciously assumes responsibility for your emotional stability. That is the death of attraction. Desire cannot flourish under caretaking, it thrives alongside purpose. Purpose doesn't mean instant success or grand gestures. It means direction, a trajectory that demands discipline, effort, and sacrifice. A man with purpose moves differently. He is selective. His time is valuable. His attention is earned, not endlessly given. Here's the trap that masquerades as love. A man pauses or abandons his goals to make a woman comfortable, believing he is demonstrating devotion. What she sees instead is a man who yields under pressure. That signals weakness, not commitment. When you step away from your path to maintain her comfort, you teach her something dangerous. Your life is flexible, negotiable, secondary. And when purpose takes a back seat, respect fades. Not because she wants to compete with your mission, but because she needs to witness that you have one. A man anchored in purpose doesn't chase validation. He doesn't orbit for reassurance. He doesn't make himself available at all hours. He extends an invitation, not a plea. That shift restores balance because the relationship exists alongside his life, not as its center. This is a truth men often discover too late. Sacrificing your trajectory for someone else does not strengthen the bond. It weakens the man within it. In her eyes, that diminishment feels like instability. Purpose grounds you. It gives your boundaries weight. It gives coherence to your decisions. It gives gravity to your presence. And women respond, not because it benefits them directly, but because it signals a man who knows where he is going. Even when boundaries are enforced and direction is maintained, there remains a reality most men resist. Sometimes, respect never fully returns. This is where the hardest truth emerges, the one that shatters the illusion of control. A lack of respect isn't always a reflection of failure. Sometimes it's a reflection of misalignment. No amount of effort, no amount of personal growth can force respect when values, emotional rhythms, or conflict styles simply do not match. Not every woman who disrespects a man does so because he failed to enforce boundaries or lost purpose. Sometimes, even when you do everything right, you encounter resistance, distance, or a sense of being unseen. That's not a challenge to fix. It's a signal to observe and understand. Compatibility is not just chemistry or fleeting attraction. It's a deeper alignment of priorities, emotional responses, and conflict resolution. When these elements are out of sync, friction naturally emerges, and unresolved friction grows into distance. Many men remain trapped, confusing desire with necessity. They assume that because they want her, they need her. But want is fueled by fantasy, attachment, and infatuation. Need is grounded in stability, clarity, and growth. Ignoring that distinction keeps a man in a cycle of effort towards something unsustainable. Notice how you feel around her, not during highs, but at baseline. Is there ease or constant tension? Are conversations restorative or draining? Are you becoming more grounded or more guarded as a man? These questions are far more telling than the intensity of occasional chemistry. Here is the defining truth of strength. A strong man does not attempt to reshape a woman who is not aligned with his path. He does not fight reality. He does not force compatibility. He recognizes when staying would require diminishing himself to maintain the connection, and he chooses not to pay that price. Walking away is not failure. It is discernment. It is respect for oneself. It is an acknowledgement that your life, purpose, and integrity are non-negotiable. The pattern is clear. A man who stands for himself, enforces boundaries, and moves forward with purpose communicates something irrefutable. He is whole. He is anchored. He is magnetic without trying. That presence restores what cannot be manufactured: admiration, respect, and attraction. It is not coercion. It is not manipulation. It is the natural consequence of existing fully, consistently, and intentionally. And that is the final point every man must understand. The journey to being respected is never about controlling her actions or bending to maintain comfort. It is about creating a foundation of self-respect, purpose, and clarity that cannot be shaken. It is about making the relationship a part of your life, not the center of it. Because when a man stands firm in who he is, with boundaries, direction, and unshakable self-trust, the respect he receives is automatic. It cannot be earned through effort alone, only through presence, integrity, and alignment. It's the ability to step back and see a situation clearly and say, "This does not bring out my best." That decision, more than any argument, boundary, or explanation, restores self-respect immediately. Respect cannot be demanded where alignment is missing. It cannot grow in a space where you are constantly proving your worth, and it cannot be negotiated where peace doesn't exist. The deepest form of power a man can have is not control or dominance. It is choice. The choice to stay when something is healthy and to leave when it isn't, without resentment, without anger, and without seeking approval. The moment you choose yourself without fear, without needing anyone else to validate it, respect returns, even if she never consciously gives it back. That is the truth most men resist. Respect is not earned by pleading, performing, or proving. It's restored when a man realigns with who he is. When you stop asking, "How do I keep her?" and start asking, "Who am I becoming by staying here?" Everything changes. Respect doesn't come from how much you give. It comes from what you refuse to abandon, your self-worth, your values, your direction. When those are intact, respect follows naturally, not just from her, but from yourself. And that self-respect is the kind that lasts. This isn't a lesson on controlling a woman. It's a lesson on refusing to lose yourself while trying to be loved. The moment you sacrifice who you are to preserve a relationship, the relationship is already compromised. It just hasn't shown it yet. A healthy connection doesn't ask you to shrink. It doesn't demand silence in the face of discomfort. And it never asks you to trade your future for temporary approval. The right dynamic challenges you to stand taller, not disappear. So if you've grown tired of bending, guessing, and tolerating what quietly drains you, this is your line in the sand. Choose yourself without anger, without blame, without needing her to understand or agree. That single choice restores your power. If this message hit closer than you expected, subscribe, not for motivation, but for clarity. Like and share this with a man who's trying too hard to be chosen. And leave a comment with the moment you realized you had been allowing too much. Because women don't respect men who lose themselves trying to be loved. But they always respect the man who stands firm, even if he has to stand alone.